Welcome to my review of Golden Axe for the arcade. And all this footage is going to be from my no damage tutorial, which I will link in the description, so check that out. It took me around 7 hours and 47 minutes to do a no death run of the game. I just kind of wanted to do that since it was a short game and I just felt like I could, reasonably pull that off. And I thought it would be cool to do, so I spent some extra time with the game. But if you're just looking to beat the game, this is a pay-to-win kind of game. So if you're playing this on MAME emulator or in the arcade, you can just keep paying to continue exactly where you died until you beat the game. But since it's such a short game and a very learnable game, it's really a lot more enjoyable, at least to me, to try to actually master the game to the point where you can do it, pretty much with no deaths in my case, or if you can just, do it on low credits is cool. Like if you can do it in under 2 or 3 credits is always a cool thing to try to do. To give it a sense of challenge. One thing I do with these types of games, which I call coin waster games, because you can pay to win and just waste coins basically. And I call games with penalties for the arcade, I call them console style, because most console games do have penalties for death, where you have to start back at checkpoints or even restart the entire game when you run out of continues in a lot of games. So, for me, the way I give myself an incentive to play these coin waster style games where you usually just pay to win is I set a credit limit. So what I do is I will try to beat a game on 4 coins, and if I can do that, then I consider it console style, and I'll put it in my console style arcade game list on my games beaten list. It's just an extra incentive I have to try to do these games on lower credits. And the reason I go with 4 credits is because that allows you to have 3 continues, because you have to put a credit in to get your first, to start the game. And then you'll have 3 continues after that. And the reason I chose that number, it's just for my own little legit rules, because I enjoy playing by my own rules, is because a lot of console games, would give you a default 3 continues. It was a very common thing. In the 8 and 16-bit eras especially, so that's the number I ended up going with. But yeah, so I always pick this character that you see me picking, this Gilius Thunderhead, because his axe has the widest hitbox, basically, so it connects really easily with enemies. And I also like his back attack, which he rolls back. You need to have a little distance from the enemy, but it's a great way to take out enemies and keep everything clear, and crowd control and knock enemies out of the way. So I really like this character overall. A lot of speedrunners will use the down thrust move, where you run and you do a down thrust. I never use it because I find it kind of hard to connect with, and I found strategies and a playstyle that worked better for me when I did the no damage tutorial and the no death run. The no death run was completely legit. The no damage tutorial, what I did was I just replayed each stage until I could do it with no damage, from the beginning. So I did do each stage with no damage, but I didn't do the beginning of the game to the end straight through with no damage. But the no death run was straight through legit. But for tutorials, sometimes I will take some extra time and refine each section. I'll do each section legit, but I'm not doing it as a whole. It's a segmented run basically with save and load states. So yeah, this is what Gilius Thunderhead, which is my favorite character, but you're going to see that a lot of this game is really about memorization and positioning. And if you watch my tutorial, I'm going to explain and break that down, and you're really going to see what I mean by that. It's really a very learnable game for the most part. Very, very memorizable. And that's one of the things that's enjoyable about it, too, is just really mastering your positioning and executing everything. It's a satisfying game. Certain bosses, a lot of them can be exploited. Like if you have the dragon, just get some distance and keep shooting these fireballs until the boss is dead. So there's definitely, once you learn, you can exploit the AI pretty easily at parts. But you're still going to have a lot of challenge with the final boss fight. If you're trying to go for a no-death run, it's going to be tough, because the last boss is very hard not to die on, because there's a lot of minions. And I'm going to actually show the final boss fight. One of the attempts I did with no damage, I'm going to show the whole final stage, because, it's such a short game. It's only about maybe 12, 14 minutes long, something like that. So, I figured I would show some of the stages, at least the final stage in full, because it's going to be such a short review otherwise, But yeah, this really is a classic game. It has one of the best soundtracks of any game, in my opinion. And the art style is among the best. But I am going to be more critical because, when I'm rating a game, I'm mainly rating the gameplay, even though I know that, visuals and the music contribute greatly to the enjoyability and experience of the game, but core gameplay is like usually my main focus. Like when it's a game for me, that's the main thing. I mean, other things are like enhancements to me, you know what I mean? If there's other things that add on to that core gameplay, that's great. And I love that shit. But when I'm reviewing a game, I'm mostly focused on that gameplay. And I try not to factor in nostalgia too much either, because most of these games that I review, these older games, a lot of them I've played when I was very young, and they had a huge impact on me. So that's, something I can't erase from I'm always going to be a little bit biased, no matter how hard I try to view it from an outside angle. I really, can't fully do that. But the gameplay is actually really good. The hits are great. And when this game came out, I would say it was, one of the best beat-em-ups of the time for sure. But I'm going to be reviewing it, based on how would it hold up today. And for a beat-em-up review, released today, it would be way too short, you know what I mean? Which, that's where the replayability of the game comes. Because the game plays so well, it's really enjoyable to replay and master. And not everybody's going to be into doing that with a game. Not everybody wants to keep replaying the same parts of a game to master it. So that's not going to appeal to everyone. But if you don't replay this game to try to master it, it's not going to be that challenging for a lot of players to just merely beat it on a few credits. Now, a no death run is pretty challenging. Like I said, that took me about 7 hours and 47 minutes. And that was with using isolated save state practice to practice things like this. You can see how hard this fight can be with these boss and all these minions and the way I'm dodging. Definitely took some practice to get this whole routine down. And, with the boss, it can feel very random at times. It's not always easy to lock the skeletons in the positions you want them to be into. The skeletons are the hardest enemies in the game, single enemies, so they can be very dangerous. But it is really satisfying. This game is really satisfying when you can pull everything off and you get into a groove with it. It's fucking, it's a nice feeling. It's a really enjoyable game. And like I said, I love the fucking visuals, the impact of the hits, the music. Like I said, I think the soundtrack is one of the best ever. And, personally, I love the fucking game, but I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10 because, the length, it's just a little bit too short for most players, because, unless you really enjoy replaying games, you're not going to get a ton of time out of it. And, if you're a newer player, you're not going to have the nostalgia, and, a great soundtrack is not necessarily going to be enough to carry over the gameplay, you know what I mean? So I do think the gameplay is very solid, and it does have a decent selection of moves, but not a lot because it's an older beat-em-up. But if it was one of the first beat-em-ups to have running attacks, like running dash attacks, which is great for mobility, unlike the first Streets of Rage game where you have to walk everywhere. It really does add a dimension to the fighting, but, nowadays that's commonplace. So it's not going to rank as highly now just because it has some of those more modern features like, the running dash attacks, the down thrust, and all that kind of shit. Rear attacks, like you can roll backwards with the Gilius character. The thing is, though, using the other characters I don't find to be too useful because, they exist, but they're both very similar the way they play. The female and the male character, Tyrus Flare and the male character play very similar. Their sword has a very short reach, it feels like, and I find it harder to land hits, and it's just not as satisfying to me. And there's no reason why I would use those characters, because to me they play worse. So I find them to be kind of, negligible. And each character also has magic that you collect and use. And, of course, the magic is cool, too. But it's really not a reason to pick one character over another. The main thing you're going to be doing is striking with your weapons. So you want to find a character, in my opinion, that has the best weapons. Now, if you're speedrunning, you may choose other characters for different reasons, of course. But gameplay-wise, I think the game, it still plays very tight. But there's not a ton of variety in enemy types. There's a lot of ways to exploit enemies, obviously. Exploit bosses, as I show. And like I said, the game is short. So For a game of today, I would say it holds up as a 7.5 out of 10. But to me, of course, it's worth a lot more. But, I want to try to give a fair review for each game. And I only really review games that I completed. So let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.